Once again, welcome and good morning, everyone. My name is Andrew Hone, and I'm the president and CEO of the Portland Business Alliance, Greater Portland's Chamber of Commerce. Thank you so much for joining us today for our December video forum. And I can't believe I'm saying this, but it is thankfully our last video forum of 2020. It feels very refreshing to say that it is the last of anything for 2020, as I know so much of us are looking forward to the conclusion of this remarkable year. So everyone here at the Alliance truly hopes you're well in advance of the holiday seasons. We hope you're staying safe, staying home, staying with your families. We wish you well in advance of the end of this year. And as we continue to navigate through the COVID-19 crisis and the restrictions and the changes, we encourage everyone to continue to practice safe physical distancing and help us all contain this virus by wearing your mask. And clearly, we are all cheered on by the news of the arrival of vaccines here in Oregon and looking forward to brighter days ahead. During the COVID-19 closures, we will continue to work diligently in being a resource to all of you, our community. Our website is updated frequently. There it is. Look at that. That's how frequent it's updated. I just say it and it gets updated. And follow us, of course, on social media for updates. You can locate us on Twitter, Instagram, and elsewhere. And there they are. A recording of this presentation and links for resources mentioned will be available on our website later today. And of course, none of the events could happen without the support of our members. And I want to make sure that we give a lot of thanks and gratitude to our key sponsors who have stuck with us through this remarkable year, and that is KeyBank and the Portland Tribune. So first, I'd like to recognize one of our sponsors, particularly KeyBank. Michelle Weisenbach, who is the regional president, could not be with us this morning, but she's an absolute outstanding supporter and member of our board of directors. And just thank you to Michelle. KeyBank operates 74 branches in Oregon and Southwest Washington, helping our communities thrive. And we just really appreciate all that you've done for us this year, KeyBank. So thank you. And to the Portland Tribune. Today, we are lucky to be joined by Joseph Gallivan. Joseph, welcome, and thank you again to the Trib for all the support this year.
Good morning, and thank you for that. I'm Joseph Gallivan. I'm with the business section of the Portland Tribune. I'm standing in for Mark Garber, our president. We're just really interested to hear today the stories of our fellow journalists. So for those that don't know, Pamplin Media has 24 newspapers around the city. You've probably seen the black and red flag on the top of the papers, you know, the Gresham Outlook, the Lake Oswego Review, even the Columbia County Spotlight. So we have journalists everywhere. And what's been interesting this year is we're personally affected by the news, as journalists are this time, with the recession, with people on our staff having COVID-19, and then with the protests, we have reporters out there and photographers getting hit by plastic bullets. And then with the wildfires, we had journalists who had to pack a bag. So, you know, during the day, they didn't know if they were coming home to find their house still there or to be evacuated. So it's been a interesting year for journalists because we don't want to be in the story, but we sort of get pulled into it sometimes, and social media just amplifies that. So I'm really interested to hear how our fellow journalists have been dealing with this new reality. So thanks to the Portland Business Alliance for keeping us all connected during this year, because particularly as a business journalist, I need to know who's out there and how to contact them. And the PBA has been a really valuable resource. So I'm looking forward to hearing your stories.
Thank you so much, Joseph, and to both of our sponsors. And actually, I believe that you really teed this up, that everybody in some way or another this year has been impacted in their personal and professional lives by the remarkable events. And the media is definitely part of that storyline and narrative this year. And here to introduce our panel and our moderator today is Mike Golub, and is our board chair. And I want to just put this on for you, Mike. I want you to know, can't do that upside down. This one's for you, Mike Golub. Welcome and thank you for your leadership this year. We are just absolutely thrilled to have you as our board chair. So take it away, Mike.
Thank you, Andrew, and welcome everybody. We really appreciate all of you making the time to join us for our December forum. It's such an important and timely topic, and as you will hear, we have an all-star lineup who will take us through what I know will be a lively discussion. We will, however, have time at the end of the hour for questions, and so we ask you to please use the Q&A tool, which you'll find at the bottom of your Zoom window. When you submit your questions, please, your name, your company, and where your company is located. Feel free also to, in real time, use the comment or chat room today as the discussion ensues. And it's my pleasure now to introduce our moderator, the inimitable Kerry Tymchuk, who I'm sure all of you know, who's the executive director of the Oregon Historical Society, and Kerry will introduce our panelists and lead our discussion today. So thank you again, Kerry.
Well, thank you, Mike, and good morning, everyone. Pleasure to be with you today for this. It's going to be a very fast-paced, fun discussion. You know, the late great radio announcer Paul Harvey, he of the Rest of the Story fame, once said that in times like these, it's always good to remember there's always been times like these. Well, in this case, though, I think Mr. Harvey was wrong. I don't know if there's ever been times like these that we've lived through in 2020. What with, of course, the grappling with the pandemic, with racial reckoning, and here with 100 protests plus more nightly, and here in Oregon with catastrophic wildfires that devastated entire communities. It has been a year like no other before. And here to discuss it with us today is a dream team of Portland media heavyweights. Joining the panel are Lizzy Acker, reporter with the Oregonian and OregonLive. Ken Boddie, of course, you all know Ken as the anchor at KOIN. Dan Haggerty, anchor at KGW. And Joe V, anchor with KPTV Fox 12 Oregon. Welcome, everyone. Looking forward to hearing what you all have to say. And let's go around quickly just with a brief introduction of yourself. And here's a challenge for you. Use, let's say, 2 to 3 words, just that many to describe 2020. And Lizzy, we'll start with you. Got to unmute yourself, though. And
unmute myself, yes.
There you go.
Successfully unmute myself. I'm a reporter for the Oregonian, not a technology professional. And, you know, I might be sounding too optimistic with this one, but I'm going to go with rock bottom.
Rock bottom, all right.
Hopefully.
Ken, how about you?
I'm Ken Boddie with KOIN TV. I've been at KOIN for 35 years, worked at KPTV before that, so I've been in the market almost 40 years. I would say my 2 words are tumultuous and troubling.
Joe, over to you.
Hey there, Joe Vithiathel, but everyone calls me Joe V. I'm the feature reporter for KPTV Fox 12 Oregon. I've been here for 14 years, so not quite Ken Boddie territory, but we're getting there. I was going to go with hot mess, Kerry, but I'm going to go with something a little more eloquent and just say historically turbulent. I always heard about the year 1968 and what a crazy year it was, the death of Martin Luther King and Robert Kennedy and the Chicago riots and the race riots. And I think it took a long time, but I think this year actually beat 1968 out for the craziest year in recent history.
Dan, anything more optimistic?
No, not really. Hi, I'm Dan Haggerty. I anchor the story with Dan Haggerty at 6 o'clock at KGW. Thank you to the Portland Business Alliance. This is a real honor to be part of this panel. Kerry, thanks to you as well for moderating. I asked the viewers not long ago to answer kind of a similar question. And I got introvert's paradise, which I liked because I can be kind of an introvert despite, me being on television and all. Reassessing priorities, which I think is certainly true. And somebody used the poop emoji -show, which I'm still trying to decipher. I think I get what they mean by that. But for me, mine's a little cornier, I guess. My two words would be Will and Miles, who they're my twin sons. I don't know if you can see this. It's kind of hard to see it on there, but you know, I think like so many families, I woke up every day despite everything else going on, and it came down to my family and them, and how my wife and I were going to navigate this really strange year and still manage to raise two twin-year-old, 4-year-old boys. You know, we were doing stories about preschool for all, and how you know, proponents of that were telling us how vital preschool was, and there's this evidence that shows that the kids in preschool, if they go to preschool, it sets you up for your whole life and future generations. And here my kids are not in preschool, so I think that's a challenge that we've been going through all year, and I woke up every day thinking about those two, and I know so many parents can relate to that.
Well, this is the last month of the first year of a new decade, and I think, as you've all said, it's already been one hell of a decade. Looking back at this year, though, Ken, and we'll start with you, what has been the most impactful news story or issue you covered this year, and how has it changed your perspective, if it did?
Without a doubt, it would have to be the issue surrounding race, starting with George Floyd in May. The protests nationwide that followed that, as well as Portland being the epicenter for a lot of that protest activity. Portland coming to grips with its own racial history. I mean, from gentrification to, you know, what happened in terms of displacement of people after the Vanport flood in 1948 into the Albina neighborhood, and now people being pushed out of that neighborhood because of gentrification. That has a racial context to it. And it really hit home to me just a couple of weeks ago, because I got a terrible racist letter, which was very threatening. And it shocked people here at the station that I got something like that. We decided to air that and to do a story about it. And I basically just gave my thoughts about race and how it has affected me. You know, one of the things I said in my response was that, you know, I never choose to play the race card, but the race card is part of the hand that I was dealt. So in dealing with racial issues and the racial reckoning, not only in Portland, but nationwide, that has been, through a number of stories, by far the most impactful for me. And, you know, part of that for obvious reasons, because I am African-American.
Well, thanks. And as you know, Ken, here at the Historical Society, we've made a special effort to tell what I say, the whole truth about Oregon history, the good, the bad, and the ugly, through our exhibits. And this past January, with our OHQ, a special issue devoted entirely to the issue of Oregon's white supremacist past. And we'll continue to do that. Appreciate your thoughts there. Joe, how about you? What the most impactful news story you covered this year, and how it changed your perspective? You're on silent. There you go. Still on silent. There you go.
Okay, well, it only took me about 9 months to figure out how Zoom works. So Kerry, you know, as some of the people watching this may not know, I mean, what I do for a living on Fox 12 is I cover kind of the lighter side of things. I'm a feature reporter, so fun events, you know, restaurants, fitness, sports. I've done a lot of segments at the Historical Society with Kerry. That's always been a lot of fun. And, you know, basically everything I cover, every aspect of our life in this year was somehow impacted by the pandemic and the response to it. And I guess what struck me the most was how fragile our local businesses were. Many of them that have been here for decades, that were institutions, public institutions, cultural institutions that I've worked with for years, for over a decade now, that, you know, seem to be on solid footing, and all of a sudden their very existence was up in the air. And speaking with, you know, people, for example, celebrated chefs here in Portland who, you know, are household names in the culinary world, and all of a sudden they're trying to figure out how to kind of stay alive, you know, stay afloat. So that was really, you know, unexpected to see. Obviously, there was the very human toll of what happened with the pandemic in terms of, you know, the illness and the deaths, but the economic impact of how our whole nation responded, our whole world responded to this was quite impactful to see.
Dan?
So for me, we when the protests were really spiking, when the federal government was showing more presence down at the courthouse, and it just seemed like things were growing and growing every night, and they were turning ugly every night. We were doing night after night of coverage on it, and viewers started writing in and saying, "Well, why don't you send Dan down there?" And so we did, and we were at the time taking the COVID situation very seriously at KGW. We were only doing solo anchor shows. My show is a solo anchor show anyhow, but when it came to kind of quarantining and staying away from people in the newsroom, the people who were coming in was being taken, and still is being taken very seriously. And I decided to go down and cover the really nasty parts of the protests into the violence at night. And yeah, a lot of people here in Portland probably don't know, this is my first time doing the full-time anchor gig. I was always a reporter my entire career. When I anchored, I did weekends where I filled in, stuff like that. So I was always used to kind of going out and being the guy on the street doing those reports. And it is a bit of a transition watching huge stories happen and being kind of one step away from how I'm used to covering it. So going down there and kind of being in the mix, seeing the way everything transpired for me personally was helped me tremendously in my ability to tell the story the way that I saw it, the way that I experienced it, and it changed the way I think I've been able to discuss protests and the protest movement and activists in this community and a lot of different things in the police response in this community, because I've only been here for about 2 years, and in terms of those things, it's unlike any place I've ever lived.
And Lizzy.
Can do it. I unmuted myself.
Awesome.
Well, I think I was thinking about this a lot, and in March I happened to be working a Sunday shift when Kate Brown declared a state of emergency around coronavirus, and I went to the press conference. It was an in-person press conference. There was very few other reporters, maybe like one, and some TV cameras. And I just keep thinking about that press conference and that moment, because we were joking about shaking hands, and there was this, I had just heard about social distancing, like on the radio. And so I asked one of the officials about, will we be social distancing in a way that, you say the phrase and it doesn't even make sense to you. Like now we know that phrase so well, but it was the first time I think I'd even said it out loud. And they've, said, of course not. We're not going to be tracing anything. It's not a big deal. It's not that, we're doing this state of emergency, but, it's not that communicable. It's not like measles, which everyone can get. And thinking back, that was maybe one of the biggest turning points in my life, in the States history, in our country's history, and literally everything about my professional life and my personal life changed within, a couple weeks of that, even right around then. And I think that obviously the coronavirus is this huge story that's ended up having so many more implications than just a health story, obviously. And I've also been thinking about how the coronavirus has created this situation that partially allowed for these massive racial justice protests that I think have had a huge impact in a way they might not have if we didn't have this set of circumstances.
I know that all of you as members of the media feel the responsibility and the need to get the story right. How do you think, give the media a report card on how you think you've done on getting the stories right this year? Joe, we'll start with you. There you go.
There we go. So I'm hesitant to grade my colleagues in the media because, as I mentioned, myself as a feature reporter, I'm not the guy, like as Dan was saying, Dan was out there in the protest in the middle of it. I wasn't, so I'm definitely hesitant to assign a grade to the people that were out there doing that. I will say it was there was a great degree of difficulty that I saw, and part of it was what's become kind of obvious and what's kind of sad is that numerous elements, whether it's on the left or on the right, are extremely distrustful and outwardly hostile towards what they consider the mainstream media. You know, this group over here thinks we're funded by George Soros and we're just putting out fake news. This one thinks we're a bunch of corporate shills that are propping up a racist status quo. So, you know, many of my colleagues here at Fox 12, and I know at the other stations, have been threatened, in some cases actually physically assaulted. People don't want to talk to us. So how do you report the full story when so many participants, not all of them, of course, but are not only unwilling to speak to you, but are outwardly hostile and make your job that much more difficult to uncover really, you know, what's going on. So it's a tremendous challenge. So I'm not going to necessarily critique one way or the other. I will tell you this, we are doing the best we can to tell the truth. I mean, there is no agenda here other than getting the correct information out there to the public at large. And we're doing our best, but boy, has it been a challenge.
And Dan, your thoughts on that? How's the media doing getting the story right? And the issue that Joe raised. I mean, we live in a time when we have a president of the United States who every day attacks the media.
Well, yeah. I mean, geez, how long is this again? First of all, to start with the attacks on the media from the president or otherwise, you know, I think while we're going through kind of a tough time when it comes to, you know, having people trust us, at the same time, I see that as a good thing in some ways, because, you know, it reminds us how important our jobs are. It reminds younger people who are becoming journalists now how important it is to be right instead of being cool on Instagram. It's more about journalism now. We're held to task. People really, really pay attention to what we say and what we tweet. And, you know, that's the way it should be. And I think if nobody cared what we were doing, then we should be scared. But the fact that everybody is so hyper-focused on everything we say, and because everybody has a voice now, and I mean every single person everywhere with social media, you're going to hear it a lot. But I think, you know, we should have a little bit of anxiety when we go in to tell a story to think, are we doing this? Are we doing this right or not? So I think that has benefited us. As far as, you know, the media getting it right, you know, sometimes I wonder what the media is anymore when you use that broad term. If I'm talking about our local outlets and more the traditional media, I think that we did a fantastic job. You know, and I know at KGW we have segments that have really taken off called Verify, for instance, where we kind of go into just the meat and potatoes of a story and try and, you know, kind of get rid of misinformation and disinformation and tell people kind of the facts and why we know things. But in terms of me going down and covering the protests for a few nights as an anchor, I mean, Ken knows he has reporters at his station who went down there for night after night after night after night, risking their health, you know, in more ways than one to go down there and cover these stories. So, you know, I think that brave journalism has stepped up. I think that those journalists take themselves and their jobs extremely seriously. And I think that the climate that we're in has, you know, reminds us how important that is. And at the same time, you know, the media has, as far as what a consumer would consider the media, where do you draw that line? Because we see anybody with a camera and a live stream or a Twitter account is becoming a source of information. So whether or not the media is getting it right, I would say no. I would say overall, if everywhere you could read a story or see an opinion is the media, well, then no, it's a messy landscape of misinformation and facts all kind of blended together. But I think the sources that you find that you can trust, I think that they've risen to the occasion.
And along that line, Dan, you know, my former boss, former Oregon U.S. Senator Gordon Smith, now head of the National Association of Broadcasters, he said there's never been a more important year than this year, perhaps for local broadcasters, because people are turning to them to see the news on the pandemic and on violence in their city. Ken, over to you on your thoughts on responsibility, how the media is doing and getting the story right. You're on mute still. There you go.
Well, as Dan and Joe have alluded to, the media has become, that term has become an all-encompassing thing now. And I think that we on the local level actually are at an advantage in being able to tell the truth and have people believe us because we've established a relationship with our viewers already. They have come to have a modicum of trust anyway in what we say and what we do. And because we live in this community, we have even more of an incentive to get it right. I built my career on credibility and accuracy. And I think when, I vet whatever I have to say on the air or whatever I have to read on the air, then I go to extra lengths to make sure that it's right and that it's a fact. I think that our reporters who are out in the field, I'm more so an anchor now, so I don't go out in the field as often as I did in the past where I built my career. But I think our reporters have done an incredible job, and photographers, we can't forget them, in terms of being able to tell the story at the local level under some incredible challenges. We've had journalists threatened. We've had journalists work long hours. We've had journalists have to go out and cover protests and have security with them just in order to go to the scene of the story that they're trying to cover. So I think in terms of the challenges that our local journalists, and I want to make that delineation, our local journalists have gone through in order to tell the story right, I think that by and large, we've done a very, very good job under difficult circumstances. And again, I just want to reiterate the fact that because we are local, because we live here, we have an incentive to get what happens here right.
And Lizzy, the Oregonian has been part of Oregon since statehood days and been covering the day-to-day history of Oregon for all that time. How's this year been for you in getting the story right?
Well, I think, I really agree with everything that everybody's said. I think my colleagues at the Oregonian have done an amazing, amazing job, and in a very scary situation in a lot of ways. Tear gas is, we don't even know necessarily what the effects are going to be on your body, and they've gone out there night after night. Not me, so I have to say I made the choice not to, and I really, really commend everyone who has done it. And I also think, we could do better. Everywhere, journalists or, media organizations, we need more people of color. We need more people who've experienced poverty. We need real diversity. And I know that we're working on it. A lot of places are working on it, but we could do better because we're trying to tell the truest story possible, and your perspective as a human being, no matter what, it always is going to be there. So I think that's where we should all look to, is just finding more diversity in the people who are telling the stories, in the people that are telling vetted, honest, true stories. That I think local media, that's what we're doing.
Dan, this is a business audience, so a business question. How do you think the media has done on reporting the devastating impacts this year has had on small business, especially here in Portland with the night after night of protests? It's what a year it's been, and is the word getting out there?
What do you think we've done? Again, I'm very proud of the way that the local media has handled this, the reporting on these issues, and it's difficult to kind of summarize that, because success for local businesses completely goes against success against the coronavirus in terms of what our governor is saying and the people studying the virus. So we had to kind of walk that tightrope of how are we telling the story of these businesses while at the same time letting people understand the importance of not packing a restaurant. And really what it comes down to is just being able to vet policy so that we understand exactly why certain mandates are being put into place. Because if I've learned anything from this year, and you have these events that capture everybody. We always talk about the news business, weather is the big story because weather is the one thing that impacts everybody. Now here we have these very impactful stories that touch everybody's lives. And what you learn is that no one likes to be in the dark. They want to be in the know, and when decisions are being made that impact their life, whether it's from their favorite restaurant or whether they own the restaurant, they want to make sure they understand how the leaders got to that decision. So for me, that was the most important part of it. I do think that it's also important to talk to the restaurant owners and hear the passion they have for staying open and staying in business and keeping their homes and understanding all the trickling effect of businesses closing and what that might mean for the identity of this city and things like that. But more than anything, what I've learned is just the appetite people have to understand the facts of stories so that they feel as though they're educated enough to have an opinion on it.
Well, let's go to a little lighter note now. So as I think you mentioned with the twins, Dan, everyone has had to figure out how to work from home during the stay at home orders earlier this year, and some ongoing now, even newsrooms, even television. So Ken, we'll start with you. Describe the most creative solution you or someone from your team had this year in setting up a studio or home office.
Well, I don't know if I would necessarily call this super creative, but here in the newsroom, there have only been a handful of us who have been coming into the newsroom every day since this pandemic began. And one of the advantages that we have here at KOIN is that we have a gigantic studio, so we can social distance with no problem. Everybody's masked up. We're staying away from each other as much as possible. And I think that just being able to navigate that has changed not how we deliver the news, but the positions from which we deliver the news. The places in the studio that we are relative to how it was before, where both of us would, my co-anchor Jenny would be sitting with me at the anchor desk. Well, now she's in another part of the studio, and I'm at the anchor desk, or vice versa. Our weather people are spread really out, and we take care when we exit and enter the studio to make sure that, as much as possible, we don't get within 6 feet of each other and we're all masked up. So I think that's changed a lot. I don't do interviews in person anymore. We're all doing interviews like we're doing this forum, via Zoom. And people on the other side of the camera have kind of figured out how to make these interviews interesting when we know that we can't physically go to the place and interview the people in person. Kerry, as you know, I do a weekly series called Where We Live. In fact, you helped me launch that 5 years ago, because my first story in that series was about the Portland penny, the coin flip. And so I like actually going out on location and seeing the things that I'm talking about. But I find that I can't do that as often now, just because of the restrictions that COVID places on us. So we've had to learn different ways to tell the same story. We've had to be creative about how we get video and the sources that we get that video from, rather than going out and shooting things ourselves if it's not going to be conducive to social distancing and being safe. So I just think it's changed the mechanism for how we tell stories, even though we're trying to tell the same stories in the way that we can and still stay safe.
And Joe, as a feature reporter, this had to be especially tough on you, because your job, your reason for getting up in the morning was to go to the scene to do a feature. And what's it been like for you? So again, there you go. So
feature reporter who's still learning how the mute button works. Yeah, Kerry. So in March, when it became obvious that things were going to be drastically different, I had to kind of reassess what I was going to do as a feature reporter, because normally I'm out at a restaurant or out at a gym or out at the Oregon Historical Society. How do I make my segment relevant in light of all the massive things that are happening in the world and how our lives have completely been turned upside down? So I decided what was going to be a main focus for me was, while I was still coming in to the station and I was still, going to work, I was going to focus greatly on life at home. So how to still kind of be the mental health break, if you will, in the newscast, because we're talking doom and gloom and all that stuff in our A and B blocks of the newscast, which is the lead stories for those not in the news industry. That's what that means. But so I was focusing on, for example, I'm a big fitness buff. So I did a segment called Fitness Friday because all the gyms were closed, where every week I would interview a different fitness expert online. And I set up a gym in my garage with weights and all this stuff. And we have the technology via cell phones to actually do a pretty broadcast quality live signal. So I was actually doing live broadcasts from home, one-man band style, meaning I didn't have a photographer working with me. I was doing it all by myself, setting it up on a tripod, in some cases using a selfie stick, doing live workouts or doing live cooking lessons. I'd interview Vitaly Paley about, he was doing some online cooking lessons. And so I was literally doing live shots in my kitchen, talking with the anchors, making my Nisswa salad with one hand and shooting it with the other. I think during one segment, I was doing there's a group called the Circus Project, and they teach kids and adults how to do, circus style feats, acrobatics and that sort of thing. And they were doing online fitness courses. And so on one segment, I was doing a headstand in my garage on live TV while shooting it with my own cell phone. And this is something I can tell you I did not prepare for when I was in broadcast journalism school.
Lizzy, the image that everyone has of newspapers, a lot of it is from All the President's Men, Woodward and Bernstein, and desks right next to each other, and people running back and forth and handing things to each other, and not so much that, especially in a pandemic. What's a new life like for, and also, interviewing somebody, if you're doing a story, an expose, interviewing somebody in person, when you get to see them close up, as opposed to interviewing somebody via Zoom, it's got to be a whole different industry now. And
yeah, it's completely different. I think the feeling of the newsroom is probably one of the best parts of it. The ideas going back and forth and talking things through. So that is gone. Slack just doesn't have the same feeling, but I still do Slack my colleagues constantly. And for me, and I know I'm not alone in this, probably the biggest thing is that I have just accepted that my 1-year-old daughter is my appendage. It's amazing that you don't see her right now. She's actually running up and down the hall with her dad, but I have, just accepted at this point that I have a 14-month-old who's with me all the time. She's in most of my meetings. You can hear her now. If I answer the newsroom phone, she'll say hello and, blow kisses to whoever I'm talking to. So I'm a pretty new mom, obviously. So I guess this isn't what it's normally like to have a child. But when I had a baby, it didn't occur to me that I would be with her 100% of the time. And, it's sort of a gift. It's a real gift, actually. Also, I feel kind of bad for her because she doesn't know she's a baby. But one of the great things about the Oregonian, I have to say, is that I'm definitely not the only person. I have a coworker who had a baby the exact same day as me. There's a lot of people going through the same thing. A lot of my bosses are moms themselves. And, sometimes the end of a news meeting ends with just, 5 little kids on the screen going, or whatever. So that's the main thing for me. I have a little baby who's my assistant, and she's pretty cute. So that helps.
And Dan, you mentioned your twins, and I know they've been part of your life here as you navigate.
It's interesting. I can't believe I couldn't imagine having, going through this year with a baby that little. But you get to know so much about people's family lives that you work with now, and people aren't shy about involving what their family means to them in their work life. I feel like that barrier has been broken down a little bit, and that's nice to see, because I do feel like the work-life balance is something that actually, if people can feel comfortable prioritizing their family when that needs to happen, and they don't feel weird about that at work with their responsibilities, that makes for just a happier workplace. And I feel like we've definitely learned a lot more about each other's personal lives, getting looks inside each other's homes, watching the kids wander into the background and seeing how people kind of interact with their family. And you know, I think that we should all remember that before they're an anchor or a reporter or anything like that, where you were just people with, you know, trying to do this darn thing and raise kids and, you know, whatever. But I can't stand any of it. I can't wait for this to be over. This is terrible. I like working with people every day in the newsroom, collaborating. I feel terrible for my wife. My wife and I work together. My wife is Kristen Severance, investigative reporter at KGW. And as this started changing, both of us go into the newsroom because some people have to go in. I go in to anchor the show. And but they keep everybody apart. And in order to keep people from kind of potentially spreading the virus, if that were a case, which it hasn't been, fortunately, they put Kristen and I as close together as possible since we live together. So they moved me into her office, which you've never seen a look on someone's face of more just being more troubled than seeing their husband move in with a box to then bug them every day. And I'm annoying to work around because I'm constantly roping people into like live commentaries, and I'm running like bits past them and things like that. I never shut up, and it's just been horrendous for her, I think. And at one point when I did cover the protests downtown, they wanted me to kind of quarantine, so they built a studio upstairs in this atrium, and then they made Kristen work up there with me. And it was like this open glass, we called it the marriage experiment. It's like they stuck us up in there. It was like a greenhouse that was it was either blasting with air conditioning and 30 degrees or literally 150 degrees. And we just had to kind of operate the show up there. So I think we've all pushed this to the limits as far as it can go. And I wonder how much of it will stick around. Because I think when this is all over and we're allowed to interview people again, I can't wait to go shake someone's hand and say, hey, and interview them like that. I cannot wait. But I wonder how much of the Zoom will last, because I think there is a level of convenience to that. And, you know, when you're going to interview somebody and you need it to be a quick turn rather than showing up at their home or at their office with a cameraman and going through those steps, they can just kind of put on a collared shirt, hit Zoom and do an interview that way. And I think the audience has gotten used to that enough to where I think a level of it will stick around once this pandemic is over.
So show of hands here, and you know, 20 minutes, the first vaccines will be given here in Oregon, and a great optimistic story, of course. And yeah, all of you as community leaders, as people who other people look to, will you get a vaccine when it's your turn? Raise your hand. Ken, there you go. It took a minute, Ken. Any other comments on that, or?
Yeah, well, the only reason, can you hear me? Am I unmuted? Yeah, the only reason I hesitated for a minute was because personally, I've never even taken a flu shot, you know, and I've maybe had the flu 3 times my entire life and got through it pretty well. So, you know, I take extreme precautions in terms of trying to keep myself safe during this pandemic. So I hesitated just a moment there because I'd have to think about it when my turn came up. And I raised my hand because as a matter of social responsibility, yeah, I do it. But personally, with my health history and the precautions that I'm taking now, my first inclination would be not, because I've never taken a flu shot before. But these are different circumstances, and you know, I would be compelled to do it if I was asked to.
And I think everybody has to have their own personal beliefs on these things. I don't think that it's a yes or no for every single person. They're already coming out with advice for people who have had adverse reactions to different medications or to different inoculations in the past, people who have a variety of different health histories. You know, me, I personally raised my hand because I've never had any problem with anything like that. I've gotten flu shots every year. I never had, you know, a reaction to any of the vaccines that I received when I was a child, which isn't true for every kid. You know, some kids have adverse reactions to different vaccines, and doctors advise, hey, keep a weight on that. Also, I think that, personally, I'm going to be a little later down the list. I think, this is going to be something that we are going to watch play out, and I think that it's going to play out safely. I don't think that scientists would and doctors would be able to would release a vaccine like this to the entire planet unless they felt comfortable and confident in how safe it was for the overall population. Then again, I read a lot of science fiction, okay? And I was really into zombies for a while, and I get some reluctance to, have some kind of zombie apocalypse thing start, but I wouldn't hang my hat on that.
Be a great story though to follow, zombie apocalypse. So
yeah, I feel like I'd turn pretty quick. I don't know.
So as we look ahead to put 2020, thankfully, the rearview mirror behind us and look ahead to 2021, obviously the pandemic will continue to be much of the story. So much so, are there other stories out there that we're missing? Any of you have a thought on something that, as we look to 2021, that we need to turn our focus to? Ken, I see you pushing your button there.
Yeah, well, I think for me, it goes back to what you were talking about in terms of the most impactful story personally for me, which has been the issue surrounding race. When we think about what happened after Minneapolis, then the pandemic really kind of eased, kind of raised its head and pushed the reasons for the initial protests aside. Combined with the fact that we had violence associated with the protests that weren't really part of what the protests were about. My personal feeling is that there were young people who kind of piggybacked on the unrest and just started going downtown and tearing stuff up. And I don't think those are the people who are behind like BLM and the protest for racial justice. So I think once we get past this pandemic, we haven't really resolved that issue. We haven't resolved that, and we need to pay more attention to it. And I think in 2021 that we will.
Yes, Lizzy.
Oh, well, I think, yeah, the pandemic has really brought out so many of the issues with our society that I really hope that after the pandemic is no longer like, hopefully, the number one thing we think about all the time, we don't shy away from these stories about the people who were most affected by it and why that happened. We still have these huge injustices in our country, and that our country was frankly founded on, that we need to talk about and we need to think about. And also we still have, the issue of global climate change that is happening whether we like it or not. So I think there'll be a lot to talk about.
Can I just say, go ahead.
There's a little bit of pressure on you, Joe, this coming year because of what you do for feature reporters. You mentioned that give people a mental health break, and boy, do we need that. And do you feel a little responsibility to give people a story that makes them smile?
Right. Well, I will say this, a couple things. The way I look at it for my job is one, I consider my job in the last year to let people know it's going to be okay. You can still live your lives. Things are different, but you can still, thankfully it's 2020 when I can see my mom via FaceTime at Christmas time. We can still do things. Yes, it's differently, but it's different than it normally is, but it's temporary. You will get back. You will get to hug the people you love. You will get to eventually go to a football game again. You will get to go eat at your favorite restaurant. You're going to do that. So part of it is being a mental health cheerleader. I consider myself more of an advocate now, maybe than I was a year ago. For example, especially as it relates to local small business, what can I do to help these folks that are struggling right now to pay their employees, to pay the rent, to keep the lights on? Are there things that we can do to help them out? Because these people are going through, all sorts of problems through no fault of their own. So is there a way that we can give them a platform that will help them out? So that's something that I hope to continue doing more of as we get into 2021.
Well, my thought for 2021 is my motto is to continue to think positively and test negatively. So good words of advice. And Andrew, I know there's some questions that you might have, or the questions from our audience. Let's bring you back into the loop here. There you are.
Howdy. Thank you so much, Kerry. And this has been just, it's fun. I have to say, just a little bit of background. My staff is all, of course, on Slack, and I should let everyone know that they're just lighting up on how much they're enjoying the conversation here, because it's just this moment of connecting with people that really help us to understand the state of our region. And so we're always looking to all of you in so many ways to tell us about the world. And it's just nice to hear your own introspective perspective here. So I just want to say thank you. And my team is just kind of really going nuts over this right now in the virtual setting. So I'm going to dive right.
I'm going to put you on the spot here with a question, because you came to Portland from Brooklyn, where you ran the Brooklyn Chamber of Commerce. What do you hear? What's it like in New York City and Brooklyn during this pandemic? So.
Yeah, Brooklyn, 2.7 million people, right? Half of the borough is from a place other than the United States. And it's just this conflagration of humans and issues and elements. And, it's hard, right? Because the density of that city is like no other place, right? And so it's been devastating. And so much of the folks that I connect with there have really actually just departed, right? I mean, just why cram yourself into a 10-foot square closet, which is also your apartment, when you could do all this stuff virtually. So it's been hard. It's for different reasons very difficult. And I also think similar how you saw this national versus regional thing going on between the president and local politicians. New York and Brooklyn really similar. We're in this sort of anvil moment where they were just getting hit on the head from a national perspective and also suffering locally. So it's been as equally as hard, but New Yorkers are always the same way. It's like, what pandemic, we're going to whoop this thing. We'll be back better than before, so it's a little bit of a swagger that I think we need to accomplish in a big way. So that's what I'm hearing back from my crew is that they say Brooklyn's going to be back better than ever. And I hold that very true for Portland too. So that's my response there, Kerry. Thank you for asking. And actually, it tees up a really good question because I want to get right into these Q&As. Really good stuff here. And actually, I think first I want to say Angela Cadena from Northwest Natural, love the question. I think we kind of got through that with Kerry's piece here about what is 2021 going to bring. And I want to dive into a question from Tina Burke from the International Psoriasis Council. And this is really actually for all of us to answer this question, but I want to hear from our panelists. How can we rethink and regain Portland's positive reputation as a great place to live and work? And we've been really struggling with this. What is the unknown reputational damage to Portland? And I just want all of you to reflect on how do we turn that corner? And because we've got a little bit of a moniker on us right now. So what are your perspectives?
Dan, let's start with you.
I think we're fine. Don't worry about it. People forget stuff in like a week. It's some other city will be in trouble and and give it a couple months. I mean, it takes me back to what is coming next in 2021, and I think is for journalists not to be these kind of knee-jerk reactionary journalists that are just, hey, what are people talking about on Facebook today? We have to remember we did kind of, this pandemic people did drop their guard and they decided, look, I'm going to step out and really stand for something. And we got a sense of what the community needs right now. And I think in 2021, when the pandemic ends, people are going to want to rush back to just normal life. Let me get back to the restaurants. Let me get back to work. Let me get back to everything else. And I think we have to remember what 2020 showed us, and we need to continue to work to tell the stories about race and about equity and about people's ability to own homes, people's ability to make a wage, educating our children, being cutting edge in that way. And I think that if we can focus on those things, then we'll just continue to remind people all of the great things about Portland, and the other stuff will just fall to the wayside.
Joe?
That's a big question there, Kerry. What do we do to I guess, restore Portland's image in the world beyond our borders here? I don't know, just accentuate what makes Portland Portland. And obviously, if anyone knew this and could wave a magic wand, they would do that. But I mean, we're a city known for creativity, for inclusivity, for being just an open-minded place where you can your wildest dreams, if you want them to, you can probably find someone that will help you make them happen. So, you know, again, if I knew how to do that myself, I would probably have ran for mayor. I don't know how to do that, but I do know that we can get there, and I hope we will.
Lizzy, you're going for the cute award here today, I see. So
Yeah, I thought I would just bring this to the table. You know, I think Portland, like Dan said, Portland's gonna be fine. In fact, this is what Portland wants. We want people to stop coming here, right? Like, how many stories have I written about old Portland versus new Portland? This is just gonna make a whole new generation of people move here, and you know, it's exactly Portland for you.
Dan?
Yeah, I think we're good. I think that this is kind of a moment in time for Portland. I don't think that this will cause lasting damage to our reputation, because I think that people are generally intelligent and they realize the factors that have gone into making Portland kind of tough right now. We've always had a reputation for activism. We've always had a reputation for protest. But we have had a reputation for being one of the most beautiful places in the world. And I don't think that that changes because of what we're going through in this particular moment in time. So I think we'll be okay. You know, we might get frustrated because it may take longer for that favorite restaurant to come back or to be replaced, or to be able to go and do the type of things that we love to do, but we can still do our outdoor stuff. You know, we can still go hiking, we can still do the things, you know, on the river and the ocean and things like that. You know, the hotels, hospitality industry. Yeah, I know that's going to take a while to come back. But I think eventually it'll get there. And I think people understand that, geez, we just had to go through this period of time in order to get to the next step.
Well, Andrew, I know it's almost 11 o'clock. We're up against the hour here, and I suspect our media all-stars will want to tune into the coverage of the vaccine. So we'll turn it back over to you.
Thanks so much. Yeah, I wish we could get to the rest of these questions, actually some really thoughtful ones, and just want to thank everybody for chipping in their 2 cents here. But we are at the top of the hour and we have run out of time. And again, I just think there's a huge virtual applause for all of you out there in our virtual forum attendees. And thank you all for joining us, all you attendees out there. Thanks for our participants. Thanks to our moderator. And of course, thanks to our sponsors for making this happen. We really appreciate it. Make sure to stay up to date with all of our events on our website. To all of you, you can register for future events and others at portlandalliance.com, the greatest website ever made. And as we mentioned, we will continue to share updates with you online through social media. And I want to end by just wishing everybody a safe, healthy, and happy holidays and a new year and a brighter 2020. And take care of yourselves and those that you love. So with that, thanks everyone, and have an outstanding rest of your year.